Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to this Naked Mind podcast. And I have a special treat today. I'm here with two stories. We have Mandy and Kate. Hi, guys. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you guys?
I'm good. Yeah, it's 7 in the evening. I'm in France, so I'm British, but I live in France. So yeah, just before dinner time for me over here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so I'm an hour before, but can see that you've got daylight going on, Annie. And we're
It's 11 a.m. So it's still a little day to
yeah.
go.
So good. Excited to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm excited too. So I would love to hear both of your stories, and I don't know who kind of wants to start, but just really walking us back to the beginning of where it all started for you.
Shall I go first? I usually sort of sit here and then wait for you to start, don't I, Nan? So I'm going to dive in.
Go on.
I'm going to take the Olympic torch. So I think I've been thinking about this. You know how you tell your story a few times, and it kind of can really change depending on what mood you're in on the day, can't it? So I actually was very organised, and I've written some sort of notes of my key points. Obviously in quite an kind of organised frame of mind today, but I thought that was important because I think as I've told my story a few times, what's come to the surface is this sense of everything looking okay on the surface, and there's a sense of me being a great pretender all the way through, and I can trace this really back to being a teenager and having a lot of anxiety of just feeling wrong in my own skin. And I know that's such a kind of common theme for people, for sober people and people in recovery. So yeah, there was a lot of anxiety, and there was a lot of keeping up appearances, and this sort of carried on. I was such a good girl. I kind of did everything I was supposed to do. I wasn't naughty. I mean, I did drink, but not until I was 16. And then I went to university, and nothing to really write home about then. But underneath, I was really struggling. I was struggling with mental health. I was struggling with anxiety, self-esteem, just really, really working hard. So fast forward to my 20s, I was a journalist. I trained as a teacher, then I was a journalist. I moved to London. And again, it was like it all looked fine. Yes, we were going out after work. We were, having cocktails after work in Soho, but everyone was. It was sort of fabulous. Then going home and feeling horribly anxious. And I lived in a house share as well. And this was the 90s. I don't know if you remember Friends, like the TV show Friends, right? So I was in a house share. It was like the whole of my life was sponsored by Blossom Hill. I just felt like, I really related to them. And I was living the Friends fantasy in my house share with my friends. And then, I think I kind of always had the sense that there was something not right with alcohol. And there was something, and I felt like there was something not right with me. And I was sort of living a kind of a double life, if you like. I was fascinated with health and fitness. So I did hot yoga. I was really into my nutrition, and then I'd just get absolutely slayed. Drink a bottle of wine before I went out on a Friday night, and then smoke loads of fags. And then I'd detox for 2 weeks or something. And then, so this kind of this kind of chasm, I think, sort of developed with me. It's interesting in kind of hindsight, because I stopped drinking, been on the sober path really about 8 years now. And now how I look back on it was very different to even early sobriety and the kind of sort of awareness I think I had around myself then. But the key piece for me, I guess, was motherhood. And that's where, the book comes in. That's where Mandy and I sort of crossed over in terms of a lot of our experiences, where it sort of catapulted my drinking to a kind of, it took a sinister turn, and it sort of, I would say it danced centre stage. And it was just an unholy shock. I had my first child. I suddenly was a stay-at-home mom. It's like the old story goes, if I had a penny for every mom I spoke to who went, the rite of passage, the identity shift, no time for ourselves. We dropped to one income. So there was that. I had great expectations, very tight finances for a bit. All of this, and I couldn't get to hot yoga. I couldn't even pretend to be my good self and my healthy Kate. It was like I couldn't even get there. And I just remember, you know, especially moving after I moved to the suburbs after my second child, just sitting on the patio, and it was like, I'm just sitting here with a bottle of wine on my own. My husband's at work late at night, and I just don't even kind of know who I am. And this is not cutting it. It's like, it's just not even fun. And then horrendous hangovers and all the rest of it. So I had Googled a lot of times, am I an alcoholic? I had gone to it. I tried an AA meeting, but I just hated it with every fibre of my body, because it felt like I had too much sort of shame and I had too much anxiety anyway. I had some religious stuff in the background, which I just couldn't go anywhere near it. So on this particular evening in 2013, I Googled, am I an alcoholic, at 3 a.m. and I found Soberistas website, and I've never blogged, so I sent up a little flare. I thought, okay, what do I do? Do a profile. And I wrote a blog for the first time, and it just said, I'm a mum. I don't think I can do this. I've never lost a driving license. No one really knows, but it feels dreadful to me, and I don't know what to do, and I don't even think I can stop, but I'm just blogging anyway. And then in the morning I woke up, and there were 8 responses from women just saying, we get you, like, totally, your story resonates with me, don't worry, just, you know, stay in touch, try this, read this, you know. And it was like, I literally, it was like I breathed in and breathed out. It was like, okay, I'm okay, I'm home, I'm safe, there's some people, you know. And I hadn't realised how important that was. I think through getting to know Mandy, I understand the community piece so much now. Yeah, and so that was when my sober journey began, and a slow putting together. I'll hand over to Mandy because I've just gone on now. But a slow putting together of the toolkit, and a big factor for me was self-compassion, learning to love myself, self-care, you know, all of those bits. But in the first instance, and where your book came in, was the mindset shift. Like, I had a real, okay, I've got to have the mindset. And then slowly I managed to add to that. So yeah, so here we are today. So that's me.
Oh, that's awesome. How wonderful.
Yeah, so for me, I guess I was very much kind of hedonist in the 90s. I'm a bit younger than Kate, so yeah, it was very much kind of that generation that were bored of what was going on and just wanted to rebel, I guess. Like, kind of lots of family relationships were breaking down, you know, not mine. My family was actually one of the only ones that was kind of functioning, but around me there was quite a lot of chaos. And so, you know, there was a lot of festivals and music, and it was very much that kind of hedonistic sort of, you know, live for the weekend. So I'd say from the beginning, quite heavy kind of drinking and partying. You know, there wasn't any sort of slow entry into it. And I suppose for me, you know, I became a mum when I was 26, and it was kind of like one of my avenues out of the behavior that I was in. You know, I was kind of sick of the, you know, that party lifestyle. I didn't want to be in my 30s and still being, you know, doing those things, but I didn't sort of see any way to change. And so, you know, I became a mum, and we moved to France, and I was isolated, and, you know, had 2 kids in quick succession. And that's, I think, when that kind of disconnect of my kind of relationship with self really started. It was like, I knew that I wanted to be a good mum, and I knew that that was my core value, but then I was displaying behavior that didn't show that. And, you know, and the only way that I knew how to get recognition for who I was being that party girl and being that person. And so I went back to work, and again, I was succeeding. You know, I was working as a professor in a university, so I had lots of young people around me, so it was very easy for me to carry on that kind of persona of being that cool young teacher, getting lots of recognition from then. But that kind of disconnect of motherhood kind of growing even more. So I'd be, you know, doing my day job, going to the bar with the students, then running home, getting the kids, and then feeling completely depleted, and then, you know, and then waking up at 4 a.m. and going, I'm never going to do this again, and then kind of continuing and not being able to kind of break that. And so and that went on for a couple of years. I think that it kind of got worse and worse and was spiraling, and I ended up in burnout. Like I didn't know what was going on. I was so lost, and so I went to see my doctor, and I got put on antidepressants and sort of started therapy, and we started looking at quite a lot of the things that was going on. And at that point I identified that alcohol was not helping me. So again, I sort of Googled in the middle of the night, and I found Soberistas, and I started blogging as well. And that was back in the end of 2012, 2013. And so I did a year. Kate did a year as well. So that's part of our story that we share. It's like I did a year and then was like, oh, I'm better. My mental health's better. I feel good, you know, but it was really that kind of identity. And it was so quick. You know, a friend of mine said to me, oh, I seem to be able to moderate the weekends. And I was just like, oh yeah, me too. You know, of course I can do that. And it was just so bizarre how focused and in it I'd been. And then all of a sudden it was just gone. And it was like, of course I'm a drinker. I'm a drinker. That's who I am. You know, my husband's French. We have a wine cellar. Like, of course I've got to keep alcohol in my life. Like it's, you know, it's vital for me to be happy as a human being, to have alcohol in my life. And so then I went back and forth for about 2.5 years. So I drink for about 3 months, and then I get really, really tired, and you know, my mental health would start suffering. And I'd say to my husband, wasn't I happier when I didn't drink at all? And he'd say yes, and I go la 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 la, and then I'd carry on for a bit longer. And then so I was really exhausted. And for me and Kate, we've talked about this a lot, and this sort of defines, I think, quite a lot of these people that are in this grey area of drinking. It's like when there's rules, it's okay. So the working week, you can kind of manage things, you know, but then Christmas or holidays or those times where kind of things change, then alcohol takes a real sort of center stage. And so I've been on holiday for 3 weeks with my husband and my kids. And so we've been doing, you know, continental holiday. We've been in Spain, Portugal, and France. So we've been having, you know, wine at lunchtime, wine in the evening, and I wasn't sleeping. I was absolutely exhausted. And my son, we were playing in Spain. It's the last week of our holiday, and my kids were playing next to the pool, and it was the first time that I'd ever let them go in the pool without an adult. And so we sat just on the side. And my son jumped in the pool and he hit his head. He's fine. I always have to sort of preempt. He's fine. But he hit his head on the metal bar across the sort of the pool. So he flipped back. It was terribly, you know, dramatic. And I was sat there at the table, and I was just about to have a glass of wine. And it was just this moment, this whole thing of just like, hang on a sec, too close, you know, because it was always that game of chance. And so that night I kind of again went back to Soberistas, because that had always been my place. But because I'd been back and forth so many times, I kind of felt like I couldn't go back again. And your book was a free download. There was an excerpt of the book on the site. So I started reading that at 3 a.m. And then you had I think at that time you had a free kind of, it was like a 4-day or 5-day course. And so I got up in the morning, and I can remember we were driving around this sort of place in Spain and just chewing my husband's ear off, just like, and then the unconscious thinking and the liminal thinking, and then blah, 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 blah. And it was just, it's that mindset shift again that Kate said. It was like, it's incredible how you can drop it, but then how you can pick it up again. And it was such a relief, because I'd been back and forth so many times, and then all of a sudden I was just like, okay, I get it. Like there is no place for this. Like whatever happens, I just don't care. Like my life, my kids, me, my mental health, all of this, like it's all BS basically, and I'm not interested anymore, and I'm going to put myself first. And that was it. And that was the last day one. And so that's like 3 years ago, and Kate's just over 4 years. So even though it's been like 8 years on the journey, it took a bit of time. But yeah, so I really, really thank you, because you were the last final kind of piece. And I suppose after that it was then getting community, as Kate said, and just, you know, I started an Instagram account, I started making friends all around the world, you know, and it's that piece, those things together, knowing that I could challenge my own beliefs about it, and then making friends were the two kind of key things for me. And there we go. And then we met and we started working together. So that's the next kind of part of the story.
So how did you guys meet?
So, well, on Soberistas, because I've been going backwards and forwards, I was like, oh, I don't know who any of these people are. You know, it had grown. And I remember Kate's little icon. It was like a Hello Kitty.
Hello Kitty,
yeah. And so I remembered she wrote really well, and so I basically just started stalking her, and I was like, hello, I like your, you know, she had this picture of her with a sparkly hat on. Yeah, and I was like, hello, I like your hat. And then I'd been listening to podcasts, and that was really part of my kind of mental health journey. I started listening to Gretchen Rubin, her Happier podcast, and that was the first one that kind of gave me practical tools of like, make your bed in the morning and it can have an impact directly on your happiness. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I was listening to the Bubble Hour and listening to you and listening to Home, and then I was like, I think there's space for a British one, you know, because our experiences with alcohol is so kind of particular, you know, it is very cultural and pub culture, and just so I was like, so I just sent her a message. I was like, I'm thinking about doing a podcast, would you like to do it with me? And Kate was, you know, training to be a coach at the time, and so we got chatting, and then we actually realized that we knew people in common. We used to live around the corner from each other, but we didn't know each other. You know, we probably drank in the same pub, and so yeah, and then I started training as a coach, and we decided to kind of bring our two kind of units together. I guess Kate was very much from the self-care point of view, and mine was very much from the mental health point of view, and that kind of combination is what we talk about on the podcast, and then, you know, and then the book.
Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations, you guys, on the book and everything. I mean, it's just really cool. So I love these stories. So having, you know, now been on the other side and really having like helped and coached women, what are the main questions that you get? What are the themes that keep coming up?
Yeah, I think there's a few things, because we are very interested in that. We just work with women, so we are very interested in that kind of gendered piece, and there's a lot about the female experience, trauma, rites of passage, that kind of intersect, that sort of, you know, the pale male and posh kind of centric thing, one removed from that this kind of fractured, it sounds really deep and weird, I think, but a fractured self. There's a sense of, I'm not quite sitting in my own authority, my own agency, my own power, and I'm looking in from the outside often with women, and so that kind of, you know, we always say that the self-care piece, really gritty, radical self-care, like boundaries, like saying no, like really listening in and saying, what do I need? Like, stop fobbing me off with a glass of wine at the end of the day, or a bottle of wine. I need, you know, maybe there's something political to be done. I need affordable childcare. Like, we need some kind of affordable housing in the UK where you don't have to both work all the hours God sends and then are frazzled. You know, there's some sort of political conversations to be had. All of that impact, I think it's that impact of life in alcocentric cultures and the pressure on women, just ragged, you know, that perfectionist piece, that having these enormous expectations on themselves. And then they come to us and just go, I'm absolutely bloody exhausted. Like, I am ragged, I'm exhausted, and I can't do it all, you know, I can't do it all. And part of the bottle of wine was trying to do it all and be it all. I think that's a big sense of some of the questions that come to us.
Yeah, I think it's also that that so much has, you know, the kind of rise of mummy wine culture on social media, and it's been so intrinsically linked with connection and community, and, you know, and coping with motherhood. So it's really hard to untangle for that for women. It's like, but who are my friends going to be, and how can I cope, you know, without that, and how do I relax, and what's my treat? I mean, a huge thing, like, you know, it's like, but how do I, it's my wine, you know. You have clients, it's my wine. It's very possessive. It's very much like a relationship. It feels extremely important and extremely precious, because it feels like, for a lot of women, they're spending all their time caring for other people's needs, and they just are not looking after themselves, and they don't feel like they have permission to, you know. And you can see that lighting up with people when it's like, why don't you go and have a bath in the middle of the day? Oh, I can possibly, like, it's like radical, you know. And it's like, go on. Oh, you know, that's good. I know it's crazy, but it's just having that moment and that permission to go, actually, I'm just going to do something for me. And that, me taking that break in the morning, is actually just going to allow me to have enough energy to get through wine o'clock and get through bedtime, because it's kind of that fuel that women are using just to kind of, as Kate said, just to push themselves through. And there's so many other ways that they can look after themselves. But I do think there's a lot of, it's allowing us just to be enough and not have to be perfect. And I think women carry so much shame from the beginning of their lives, you know, that they're not pretty enough, or, you know, my teeth aren't straight enough, you know, all these things. And so I think what's really helpful is just that sort of piece of community, and also just going, you know what, it's okay to, like,
It's
and
that
interestingly,
thing.
like, women say, sorry, but you know, women say quite often, is like, when I'm hungover, I get to stay in bed. Like, how sort of sad, but how much of a reality is that? It's like, that's the only time that I actually get to stay in bed and watch TV. And it's like, wow, okay, you know, it's at that point, it's not only that part of kind of the evening and the relax, but it's also the recovery time, which allows them to rest. So it's like, yeah, kind of, you can do that anyway. You can stay in bed in your PJs, you know, and watch movies, and you don't need to be hungover to sort of do that at the same time.
It's like that cigarette breaks used to be viewed at work. It was like, it's fine if you go out for, well, when we, you know, when that was a thing, everyone was allowed to go out for a fag break, but you couldn't just go stare into space. If you stared into space for 5 minutes, it'd get you to HR and occupational health, wouldn't they? And there's that the community piece as well. I think that is so key. Again, for that connection with that sort of the sisterhood, you know, working out that shame dying in, so when stories is told in safe spaces. And I know of personally, it just reminded me of when we met Mand, and I'd started the blog, hadn't I? And I'd been to see a poet, a spoken word artist called Kate Tempest, and she in Brighton. It's one of these rare nights out with my husband, and I was really moved by her. And it was about telling stories. It was about, she had, you know, lots of diverse poets telling their stories. So there's an Aboriginal guy from Australia who had grown up, you know, in the townships kind of thing, and telling beautiful stories. And it reminded me of, on sober forums, like people being able to tell their stories. But there was a bit of a thing at that time where people were, there was almost like an old guard that were like, no, you're an alcoholic. No, you've got to use the received wisdoms of it. And then there was a kind of a new voice coming through, and I felt very passionately that people need to be able to tell their stories and own their truth and find their own way. But that's kind of scary as well, because it means sort of deconstructing things. So I think it's that sort of healing kind of space with other people to tell your truth and to have those nods, you know, and that gradually you feel more confident in telling your story and owning your truth, you know.
Yeah, I actually got a question yesterday that kind of dovetails into what we're talking about. But the question was, I love drinking because of its forbidden nature. So she would drink in secret. And she's like, how can I, I've been able to not drink anywhere else but in secret, but it's something about the secrecy of it. And, in talking to her, I was like, I really believe that what you're doing is just trying to exert control over some area of your life and trying to feel empowered. And so the secrecy allows you to be like, okay, this right now, this is just for me.
Yeah.
And this is where I am just with me doing exactly what I want to do. And alcohol has gotten tied up in that. And somehow even permissional in the sense of like, okay, well, if you're drinking, like you said, if you can be in bed when you're hungover, that's fine. But if you just wanted to be in bed anyway, you can go outside for a cigarette, that's fine. But if you just wanted to step outside anyway, it's not fine. And so it's like, we've grasped onto it in a way to just take some literal control over one part of our lives and say, I'm going to do this, exert control, and I'm going to do it just for me, just because I want to do it, not because I'm being pulled in a million directions by what my partner wants or what my family wants or, what my boss wants. It's just like, I'm going to do this just for me. And it allows us this level of just, okay, this I own. But it can be really empowering when you see it, because then you could say on the other side, oh, this I own, this journey through becoming alcohol free, I own this too. And all the things that go into that. And I can actually value these things, like taking a bath during the middle of the day. I love that example. Or, just going for a walk during the middle of the day. That's something that took me a long time to just give myself permission to do. You can actually say, okay, I own these things and I can create this space and, give it, by recognizing that the core of it is just trying to exert this level of control and ownership of our own lives, then we can find other ways to do that.
Yeah, and I really relate to that. And that one thing that we've said recently to some people that we work with is that, because it sort of gets caught up in like bindweed around things, and all of the associations and all of the emotions and all the rest of it. It's like, if you that thing about if you keep it separate, right? Alcohol has nothing to do with anything. If you keep the core, like you said, and if you keep the sense of it, the sort of texture of it, what is it? And there's something forbidden. Well, maybe you want to do those forbidden things. Maybe you want to get some kink on. I don't know. Could be whatever. But there could be a flavour of that. It has nothing to do with alcohol, and it never did. It's only because you start drinking that it's all become wound up.
Yeah, and I think that's, and I remember sort of, again, that idea of when you start to challenge it and you start to go, well, that society is giving me permission to use a substance that is harmful to me, and that's something that I'm allowed to do. But me having a bath in the middle of the day is seen as, antisocial behavior, or me sort of, I'm not going to mention
deviant.
It's deviant behavior, or it's or it's frivolous, or it's selfish, or and then when you can start to add those elements of like, well, what is the sort of external messaging, and who's controlling that? Is that me? Am I really sort of making this decision that this, my secret habit with wine, is my choice, or actually has that come from somewhere else? And actually, what would I really like to do? And I love that. I love it when, that challenging the kind of the norm, and being able to feed that back and go, well, actually, what do I really actually want here? And it's, as you say, it's never about the wine. It's about a moment. It's about a feeling. It's about a story.
Yeah,
I could tell you a lot of stories about tea, but I won't go. That's a British thing. Yeah,
it's also true. So what would you say is like, some of the main pieces of advice you give to people specifically when they're sort of dealing with the social pressure of whether it's their group of moms who is still drinking, or at work, or how do you help them navigate that?
Well, I think there's a part of the kind of allowing yourself to, I never thought I'd say this in a million years, but just to grow gracefully. Like there's something really beautiful about when you can just go, you know what, like that was fine, like I really enjoyed that when I was in my 20s, but it just actually doesn't suit me now, and I don't enjoy it, and I want to, you know, we move forward, we don't move backwards. So it's like, well, what do I want it to look like, and where do I want to go? And so, you know, what other things can you do with your friends that sort of represent where you are now? Like, is it going swimming together, or going for a nice walk, or having coffee, or, you know, enjoying, I don't know, going to a cooking school or doing something else, but just sort of changing the dynamic so it's not sort of centered on alcohol. And I guess there are some friends that just are not going to follow you, you know, and I certainly have. I don't think you can ever run out of people to make friends with. And that was a real good thing that I learned. You know, it's like, I mean, you have an amazing community. Like there's so many ways now that people can meet people. And that just, you know, you're always going to find your fit somewhere, and you don't have to settle with the people that just because you've known them for a long time, they might just not be part of your 40s or your 50s, and that's fine too, you know. And yeah, so it's just kind of like keep reaching out, and sort of follow your heart and your soul and what's nourishing for you, I guess, would be my advice. I don't know.
I think that piece of I think knowledge is power. I'll add to this, because I think that once we understand how alcohol's marketed, that it's marketed on those key fears of you can't connect without me, you can't celebrate without me, and for women, you can't cope without me. I think once you start being a bit of a detective, you can really start unpicking it. So I think that's the first thing, is like, okay, well, where do we receive these messages from? And I think the fact that we're socially wired, you know, we are pro-social animals, to acknowledge that and say it's fine, and it's fine to be scared of that, but it's going to be okay. But it's about in the first instance, who do you go to for support? It's like, who do you know, we have a traffic light system. So, you know, who are your people, the green people, nearest and dearest, one or two people you tell, right? Then you might have some kind of shifts, plate tectonic shifts underneath the surface with some of your, you know, people that are in your community, but they might not be your people. So maybe they're going to drift away, but it's going to be okay. And then you've got, you know, the flashing amber people, which I think as we go along, we get much better at dealing with those people. But in the early days, put them in the red camp. You know, they don't need your story. They don't need to know anything. And then go find your sober community. You know, can you hear me all right? Yeah. So, you know, go find your sober community, whatever that is that you vibe with, you know. So those would be mine. And to, you know, when you're a drinker, I know I'll speak for myself, it was about the quick fix. And I see this quite a lot in our community and the people we talk to, is that, you know, we want instant fixes. And there's something really lovely about, like what Mandy said about, if we slow down and take comfort in that it might just take a bit of time. And the fear, just because it's a fear, it doesn't need to be a fact. And you know what, we're all going to be okay. So I think it's a bit of hand holding, you know, hand holding for that first bit until they find their people.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea that Mandy said of like, there's never a shortage of people to become friends with. We do feel so, you know, clingy, but that's so true. And some of the most beautiful friends actually happen in new phases of your life. And I remember I was having a really hard time with a friendship that was, I mean, it basically, since I can't remember meeting this girl, we went to preschool together. And, you know, in my late 30s, we really had drifted apart and just couldn't even really relate anymore. And ultimately, like, the friendship just kind of disintegrated. And I was really upset about it. And I remember another friend of mine saying, you know, friendships aren't meant to be forever. And I was like, really? It's like, yeah, no, really. I was like, oh my gosh. And it's like kind of a sad thought, but it was such a freeing thought and such an empowering thought. Like, oh, wait a second. I can actually grow into new friendships. Like, I'm growing and changing, and they are too. And it doesn't have to be forever. I don't have to keep fitting into a box that doesn't feel good anymore, or does, you know, feels too tight and uncomfortable. So I thought that was really, really freeing.
Yeah, and
that.
it's
So
also
sort of compassionate, isn't it? It's
yeah.
sort of self-compassion, and it's very compassionate for other people, that we can be a bit more open-handed. It's like we can let the ebb and the flow and the process of things that are sort of slightly bigger than us take place as well, without having to hold on so tight with that.
Yeah, I mean, something that really helped me was that kind of, you know, you have your family of origin, but you have your family of choice, and that's so incredibly empowering as an adult. It's like, I'm an adult now, like I get to choose, you know, and like how fabulous is that? Like I get to sort of put in boundaries of how much people impact on my life. And certainly I had a lot of kind of toxic friendships, so just around alcohol. And when, you know, when that wasn't part of it, it was like, well, you know, don't come and spoil our fun. And it was painful as hell at the time, but it's not about them and it's not about me. It's just about, we're just on different cycles. And, you know, and I think you find with a lot of people that kind of struggle with alcohol, they're quite deep thinkers, and they're maybe a little bit introverted or probably quite sensitive. And so then when you start to sort of develop friendships within sober communities, you're like, oh, you're like me, you know, straight to the point, like 2 seconds in, talking about, you know, the deepest, darkest secrets. And so, you know, it's just sort of finding within the cracks of all the noise, just finding those people that you connect with. And that's been the greatest gift of sobriety, is meeting people that I know like me, really for me, and without any kind of expectation or any of me having to change. It's just like, whatever's going on, they just see me as I am, and that's unbelievably freeing and nice. You know, in comparison, trying to fit yourself in a box all the time and just pretend.
Exhausting.
I guess.
Exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that so much. So if people want to learn more, they can find you both at lovesober.com.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, that's the easiest way to find us. We've got community. We've just published our book, Love Yourself Sober, a self-care guide to alcohol-free living for busy mothers. And what else have we got? We got courses. We run courses.
And the podcast, which is free.
And the pod, yeah.
And the pod.
That's the source. Yeah.
It all began with the podcast. So let me ask you guys the question that I always ask at the end of these podcasts is, you know, if you were going to go back in time, sort of have a chat with Mandy and have a chat with Kate about what life is like now, and encourage them, what would you say?
I think sure. I would say that, like, I know you don't believe it now, but one day you'll like your reflection and you'll like who you see. So just, you know, keep trying, because it took some attempts. So that was something I never expected, to get to a point where I liked myself, you know.
For me, it's interesting because I was actually thinking about this yesterday. I went for a walk with the dog in the fields, and it was very misty, and I got lit up. I got really lit up by the mist on the field and the damp and the sensory stuff. And I cried. I had a moment of sort of gratitude, and I was just all over the place, because I just thought I didn't know that I was going to be okay. Like, I had no idea. So if I were to go back to that, you know, that teenage me, it would be something about, I know you're never going to believe this. So you're going to be happy in your own skin. You're going to feel connected with yourself, and you're going to love your life, and it's going to be okay, sweetheart.
Oh, I love that. So good. That's amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. It's been such a joy getting to know you both and hear your...
Yeah, well, thank you for everything you've done for us.
Being part of our, you know, big part of the sober journey, our sober stories, and the, you know, trailblazer. Thank you.
So happy. That's wonderful. Let me ask you a question. What is better than change? Lasting change, of course. And if you've had trouble making change stick, either with alcohol or in any other area of your life, you are in for a treat. I created the 100 Days of Lasting Change to ensure that we don't just change for a moment, but we truly transform for a lifetime. And this program is so close to my heart. Thousands of people have been through it and their results are incredible. But don't take my word for it. Check it out at thisnakedmind.com/100 days. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, as it truly helps the message reach somebody who might need to hear it today.